It's time to dive deeper into the forest of algebra with multiple step equations. But as you'll see, it's really just a bunch of one-step equations in disguise. Now here's our first example, and if you don't think you're quite ready for this yet, you can watch the one-step equations video on the card on the screen right now. So you'll see that this looks pretty similar to our one-step equations, just that we have two numbers here next to x. But the goal stays the same. We need to isolate the variable, a fancy way of saying we need to get x by itself. And the way we do that is by doing anything we want to the equation as long as we do it to both sides. So before, what we would do is, let's say this was just x plus 7, we'd probably subtract 7. Or if we just had 3x, we would probably divide by 3. But what do we do here, since we have both a 3x and a plus 7? Does it matter which one we do first? Well, actually it does. If we divide by 3, remember, we have to do it to both sides, but we also have to do it to the entire side. So if we divided by 3 on both sides, yes, that gets rid of these 3's, and we just left with x, but now we're left with 7 divided by 3, and then we just have fractions, and it's really complicated. So the easiest thing to do would just be to subtract 7. That cancels these out, because plus 7 and minus 7 cancel each other out. And you're left with 3x. We don't have to do anything to the 3x because the plus 7 is its own separate term. 3x, the 3 is more attached to the x, so we want to get rid of that last. So as always, we need to subtract 7 on the other side as well, because we have to do it to both sides. 19 minus 7 is 12, and so right now we have 3x minus 12. And now you'll recognize this is just a one-step equation. And now we only have one thing next to x to get rid of. So now it just becomes, what do we need to do to get x by itself? How do we get rid of this 3? Well, this 3 is being multiplied because if you have a number and a letter next to each other and there's no sign there, then that means multiplication in algebra. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we are going to divide 3. And what that will do is that will get rid of these 3's and just leave us with x. But remember, when you do something to one side of the equation, you have to do it to the other side. So we're going to divide the 12 by 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So our answer is x equals 4. I'm actually going to show you one more thing we can do. Because yeah, with these more complicated equations, you can be like, all right, x equals 4. I think I did that right. But you can be sure that you did it right by checking your work. Now, this isn't required to complete the problem, but some teachers actually require you to check your work. And even if they don't, it's a good habit to get into. Basically, an algebra problem is just a fill in the blank problem, right? What number goes in the blank here to make the answer correct? So what we can do to make sure we did the problem correctly is put this number in the blank and see if we get 19. So we're going to replace x with 4. We're going to fill in the blank. Plus 7 equals 19. And we're basically going to just do this to see if we get 19. We have to do multiplication first because, PEMDAS. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then we're going to add 7. And 12 plus 7 is 19. And yep, that matches up with the 19 over here. So that means we did the problem correctly. Here's another problem, and I know this one looks kind of scary. It's a little bit more than 2 steps, but remember, a multiple step algebra equation is just a bunch of one-step equations in disguise. So first off, what I'm seeing is there is this little plus x at the end here, but if we moved this to the other side, then we're just going to put an x on both sides and we're going to confuse everything. But look at this here. 2 times a thing in parentheses. What I'm noticing is that we can use something called the distributive property. And the distributive property says that if you have a number outside of these parentheses, then you can multiply it by each thing, by each term in the parentheses. So we have to multiply 4x times 2 and negative 3 times 2. And it's important that this negative sign stays. So first we have 2 times 4x. Well, that's just 2 times 4, which is 8. And then the x stays there. And then the second term is going to be 2 times 3, or actually 2 times negative 3, because this minus sign has to stay. So we have 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. And now this plus x, we're just going to bring it down. We're not going to do anything fancy with it. And it equals 12. So what do we do now? Well, you might notice that we still have two x's in the problem, and we're going to want to bring it down to 1 before we can isolate it by itself. But there's an easy way to do that, and this is called combining like terms. Basically, whenever you see you have two things with an x in it on the same side, we can combine them. So in this case, we have 8x, and then we're adding another x. So in that case, we now have 9x. We're combining 8x plus x. And now this minus 6 is just going to stay the same. We didn't do anything with it. And you'll notice now that this just looks like one of our two-step equations, like the one from before. So we want to do the addition or subtraction first because we don't want to deal with fractions. That's dumb. So we're going to add 6 because that's the opposite of subtraction, addition. These cancel out, and you're left with just 9x on the left side. But remember, we have to do the same thing on the right side. We have to add 6. 12 plus 6 is 18. And now we just have a one-step equation. And we have 9 times x. Remember, this is multiplication. So we're going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So we're going to divide by 9 on both sides. So these 9s cancel out. And now we finally just have x on the left side. But on the right side, we have 18 divided by 9, which is 2. So our final answer is x equals 2. And if you want to challenge yourself, you can plug that 2 back into x. Remember, you have to do it on both of these. Both of these need to be replaced with 2 and see if you get 12. Here's an example problem that I'd like you to pause the video and try for yourself. And remember, take it one step at a time. So this is one of our two-step equations. And don't freak out about this fraction over here. Remember, fractions are just division. So we're just going to do the opposite of division when we get to that. But first, we need to worry about this addition because this is what's not attached to the x right now. So we are going to do the opposite of plus 3 to get rid of the plus 3. And in this case, the opposite of plus 3 is minus 3. So we are going to cross out the plus 3 and minus 3 because they cancel out. They just do the opposite of each other. And we're left with just x divided by 5. But remember, we have to do it to the other side as well. So we're going to put minus 3 on this side. 6 minus 3 is 3. So now we're left with x divided by 5 equals 3. And now this is just a one-step equation. So we're going to do, remember I said this was division, so we're going to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. So we're going to multiply 5 because that's going to be what cancels out these 5s. And now we're just left with x. But we need to multiply by 5 on the other side as well. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And we're left with 3 times 5, which is 15. So our answer to this problem is x equals 15. Here's our final example, and I know it looks like a lot, but remember, one step at a time, and I'm sure you'll get it. Alright, so first of all, I'm not seeing anything like plus 3 or minus 7 that's sticking out that we can just immediately deal with. But what I am seeing is a lot of these things that look like the distributive property. Actually, two of them in this case. We have this one and this one. So remember, the distributive property says when you have a number on the outside and things in parentheses on the inside, you have to multiply it to each part. So we have to do 3 times x and 3 times 1. Well, 3 times x, I mean, you can't really multiply a number by a letter, so we're just going to leave it as 3 times x. And this one, 3 times 1, well, that's 3. But now we have the other distributive property here, and this is where people get tripped up because we have a minus sign on the outside here. And this confuses people because they think we just, oh, we'll just put a minus sign here and then we'll just do the rest of the distributive property like normal. But you can't do that. And this is because this minus sign is applied to the 2. And we're applying the 2 to everything else in the parentheses. If you want to think of it like this, we can change this to a plus sign and then do this with negative 2 and multiply negative 2 to both sides. But there's a less confusing way to do it. All you have to do is put the minus sign like normal, and then big parentheses. And whatever you do to the distributive property here is going to go in the parentheses. This will remind you that the negative sign is going to apply to everything in the parentheses. So in this case, we have 2 times x, which is just 2 times x. There's nothing much we can do with that. And then 2 times 2, which is 4. But now what we should do right away is take this minus sign and attach it to each of these things. So in this case, this first one's really easy. Minus 2x is just minus 2x. And in this case, we have minus 4. We're just going to attach the minus sign to the 4. And that equals 2. Let's say that this sign right here was a minus sign. If it was, then attaching another minus sign to it is actually going to make it positive. 2 negatives make a positive in algebra. So now what can we do to make this equation a little bit simpler? Well, I'm noticing that we have 2 terms here that have an x in them, and we can combine these. So 3x minus 2x, we have 3, and then we took away 2, we're only left with 1x, or in this case, just the letter x, where we don't have to put the 1 in. Here we have plus 3, and then minus 4. So 3 minus 4, gain 3, take away 4, and then you're left with 1 less than before, so minus 1. And on the right side, we have 2. And you'll notice that in just one step, we've gone from this to just a one-step equation. And that means the final step here is to get x by itself by getting rid of the minus 1. So we'll do the opposite of minus 1, which is plus 1. These cancel, and we're just left with x. But we have to do the same thing to the other side. Add 1, and 2 plus 1 is 3. So our final answer was x equals 3. Remember, it was a lot of steps to get here, but each one was just one step at a time. When you see this big pile of algebra stuff at the top here, it can be easy to go, I don't know what to do. But remember, just think of one thing you can do to make this a little bit simpler. As you can see, we did the distributive property, because that's what this looks like. And immediately we came up with more things that we can do to make it simpler. Sometimes there's only one thing you can do here that will lead to more things you can do. I know this seemed like a big leap compared to some of the other lessons in algebra, but I'm telling you that the more you practice, you're going to get it. And remember, always think of ways to just simplify it one step at a time. If you're still a little confused, I'm welcome to answer questions in the comments if you have any, or you can review the one-step equations video if you need to as well. But remember, the more you practice it, the more you'll get better at it. And if you're ever confused with any other algebra topics, well, you can watch the entire Algebra 2 playlist right here. Oh, and if you've made it this far in the video, go ahead and comment your favorite flavor of ice cream. Because why not? Mine's cookies and cream. Yeah, I want ice cream now.